get started. This is the inaugural book club, the Wildflower Garden Planner book club, and we're going to discuss the month, like the upcoming gardening work that needs to be done in your native plant garden. And you can follow along in the book if you want, or you can just come to these presentations and we'll talk about the upcoming month. And if you don't have a copy of the book, you can get it here at the besagrows.com/book. And I have recruited two people to help me with this, Laura and Teresa. They're going to be my co-pilots in Zoom book clubbing, and I'm really grateful that they agreed to help. Um, and also, Marcia is here. She's the one that talked me into this in the first place, and she wants to talk about wild ones a little bit.
I just want to say that our chapter, our board is so excited to support this, what we consider a unique learning opportunity, not just for our members, but for the broader community. Nowhere else that we're aware of is there a month by month presentation of local, relevant native landscaping information, like in Bessa's book. And now with the online book club format, there's also an opportunity for questions and answers about each month's best practices, interactive. The board is happy that although the purchase of the book is helpful, it's not required, and that while participation means which means only the ability to submit questions and comments in advance, participation is limited to chapter members, but anyone and everyone will be able to view the monthly recordings on our chapter's YouTube channel. And we'll send that link to our more than 1,000 subscribers to our newsletter. And of course, it can be shared then by anyone. So cheers. Here's to the inauguration of the Wildflower Garden Planner Book Club, made possible through the conceptual great work of our chapter member and author educator, Besa.
Thanks, Marcia. Um, and thanks for, yeah, you always encourage me to step out of my where I feel safe. So yeah, we are going to record this and have it on the Wild Ones YouTube channel, St. Louis Wild Ones YouTube channel after this. So you can watch it again or share it with your friends or whatever you want to do with that. Oops. Next slide. There we go. All right, we're going to talk about January. It's January 3rd today. And so January is kind of a downtime for gardens, but there's still plenty of stuff to do. You can do lots of planning. You can do work in the yard while everything's dormant, but like making new paths and stuff that you couldn't normally do without smashing all your flowers. And there's also things like seeds to sow and wildlife to take care of, things like that. So a couple of things I wanted to point out is if you haven't already, you should winterize your hoses and your rain barrels. We had a disaster a couple of years ago where we had thought we had winterized the rain barrel and we didn't, and it split. And we have like a 6 rain barrel system, and it split all of them, which is a big disaster of broken plastic. And we had to replace the whole thing. So save yourself money, winterize your stuff before it freezes. And also your pond. Like it depends on what type of pond you have, how much winterizing you need to do, but just remember that water freezes and expands and destroys everything. This is also a great time to remove your invasive plants. Yesterday I was at the zoo and was noticing how much winter creeper they have on that property, but it really stands out during the winter. So it's a good time to get in there and kill it. And salt. So salt is bad for your landscape, and trying to put less salt down anywhere that it runs into your yard, like putting it on like your sidewalks, porch, driveway. Like if it runs into your yard, it's bad for your plants. The salt gathers in the soil and it stays in the soil for a long time. So try to put less salt down yourself. Also, if you have like a community organization, ask them to use less salt or maybe use brine. Um, like you can use sand, you can put down bird seed. So just let's not salt the earth every winter. St. Louis, in our winter times, our streams have the saltiness of ocean water, which, kills things. Our little fishies, and crayfish that are in our local creeks, they can't stand that. Also, the dragonfly larvae. Think of the dragonflies. Don't salt. So this is something I saw last week. The witch hazels were blooming. Have you guys seen your witch hazels blooming out there? Go and check. They're very tiny, so you got to go out there, look closely for the witch hazels. They smell pretty good, and they bloom in the winter for winter insects that are coming out, like little flies that wake up in the middle of the winter and eat some food, and the witch hazel provides that. So it's an important host plant to have in your yard, and it's pretty. And they're very geometric, I think. So if you like math, maybe you like witch hazels. So something else I saw recently was this red tailed hawk. I think this is tailed or shouldered. Margie will have to correct me on that, but it killed a squirrel. So he's got a squirrel up there. That's kind of cool to see wildlife in your backyard. And I didn't really feel sorry for that squirrel. He had been raiding my suet feeder anyway. So, and then over on the left side, there is evidence that there is a deer, which I didn't know was in this area, but there is a deer, and I guess also that's a mouse walking around the deer. It's always nice when it snows to go out and look at the tracks and see what's actually in your yard. Um, I'm moving very quickly through my. All right. So, other things I want. So, Margie Terpstra said that she could share some information about her backyard garden and what she's doing to attract wildlife this month. Margie, would you like to share your screen? I think I have
Sure,
to
sure.
unshare.
Okay. Can everybody see the slide okay? Whoops.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, well, attracting winter wildlife. That's what Besa asked me to talk about. And we've been here now for we're in our 27th year. So as I've gotten more and more developed in the yard, we see more and more every winter. It's really been fascinating. Okay. And as you'll see through Besa's book and as we talk each month, if you're going to have an ideal habitat, you need to have those three basic elements: cover, food, and water. And the native plant diversity, getting plants in every layer, is really what we need to be doing. So we have plenty of food in lots of different ways, different variety of food. Not only the insects, but which are the most important, especially for birds, but your seeds, your flower buds, fruit, berries, sap, and supplemental food in the winter. And by doing this and providing water, you end up having a safe place, a safe haven for the birds and the other wildlife to come in all year round. And I think that's really what we're trying to do, is have habitat that is meaningful to us and to the birds and wildlife. And birds are indicators of healthy habitat. So if you're getting a lot of variety in your birds, that's a good indication that you're achieving what you hope to achieve. Now, Besa mentions this in her book. We've got, I don't know if I can point here. Yes, okay. The cedar waxwings are in the shingle oak, and these leaves are marcescent leaves. They have not fallen off the tree yet, and they may be there specifically to kind of help shelter the birds, as well as provide some source of food with caterpillars that may remain there. And then there's twiggy plants, like you see these sparrows that are in the clove currant, and other plants like hydrangeas, viburnums, buttonbush. All of those that are twiggy can help protect them from hawks. Now, you see the doves down here. They're resting in the leaves, and they can be quite camouflaged there. Some sharp-eyed hawks still can grab them, but between the plants and the leaves underneath, it gives them a good place to be safe. And of course, leaving the leaves, you're going to be providing habitat for the insects to complete their life cycle. And that's really, really important. The leaves are full of life. And on warmer days, we'll see these little clouds of flying insects. And I'm sure somebody knows what these are. I'm not sure. But these little insects fly around, and they're there for the bluebirds and yellow-rumped warblers to take and eat. Now, brush piles are important too, because they're sheltering a lot of insects that are beneficial. And they're providing cover. There is a little white-throated sparrow tucked in there. And when it's cold and windy and snow-covered, it's important for the birds to conserve that energy and find a place where they're safe. And I was, excuse me, it was kind of fun to read about your ideas for the Christmas tree, because we've done that too. We don't decorate them per se, but we do sprinkle the fine sunflower chips and other seed at time in the trees that we have left. Now, Cliff goldenrod is a really important plant. It's a keystone plant when it comes to providing for all these different pollinators. And it can do well in the shade, but it's even more productive in the sun. And, excuse me. And so in the fall and winter, it provides a lot of seed for many different species of birds, including these different sparrows and finches. And last winter, we had a chipping sparrow, which is kind of rare to have in the wintertime. And I was mentioning earlier, this is the sapsucker that was on our maple tree today. We've had them almost every winter, and they're looking for sap from that maple tree. Now, small mammals will eat the insects and some of the plant material, and they become food for larger predators. And once you see birds of prey like these hawks and owls, they're indicating that you have stability in your little habitat. And we have a lot of large trees, which contributes to them being here. Now that red-shouldered hawk has a small opossum, and in the winter, occasionally they will take birds, and they eat the same kinds of food that the barred owls eat. Only they're in the daytime, and the barred owls are at night. And the barred owl here has a vole, but we've also seen them take rabbits. So the hawks are important to take birds and animals that are weak or sick even, and help keep the whole ecosystem healthier. We've had interesting encounters with mink. They were around for a few years. Back in 2012, there was a drought, and that's when they first showed up because we have larger pond. And but we would even see them in the winter. We'd get them recorded on our bubbler cam. And we had foxes for a number of years. Then the coyotes came in. And I don't know where the foxes go, but they move out and they leave once coyotes come in because they're the top predator. So this is why we need habitat. You know, we just don't have enough space for everybody. Now, our supplemental feeding, we begin about mid-November. I don't have feeders up all year round, mainly in the winter, except for hummingbird feeders. These birds have all been coming in. This is the first year we've had this little ruby-crowned kinglet, and he's been checking out everything in our different feeding stations. And the bluebirds, we started feeding more earnestly in the winter a few years ago because they'd had a really rough winter with too much snow and cold. And we've now had at least three or four successful nesting pair of bluebirds. So water. Well, water in winter is important. We do have a thermostatically controlled bird bath, and that provides that fresh water so it doesn't freeze. And this little titmouse is very appreciative, along with all the other birds that come in and use it. I'd have 3 or 4 robins there today at a time. They were quite busy. And the thing about winter, there are nomadic finches like the pine siskins and these rare red crossbills. And the crossbills in particular never went to a feeder. They were up in the trees feeding, and they only came to water 2 days in a row, just 1 year. So it's pretty special to have these birds show up in your yard. Now the bubbler is our big attraction. The water recirculates. It is pumped up through this rock and through the main bubbler rock. And there's several different levels of the water, and the birds are there constantly. Even in the winter, they do come to the water, even if there's snow all around it. And we use this de-icer. Once the forecast gets to, it's going to be 15 degrees or colder, then we put it in and we use it. And it only kicks on when the water temperature drops below 35. So it keeps that water open and it keeps it from freezing so it can continue to recirculate. And it's just essential to be able to provide water if you can find some way to do it, because no matter what the birds are eating, they all do need water. They do eat snow, but sometimes it's just really cold and they need the water. So here are just some of the interesting, unusual birds that we've had, in addition to all the usual suspects. And I think we're up to 127 species now that have been at the bubbler. So there's that common redpoll, pretty little guy. So that's what I had to share tonight. And I appreciate you asking me. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, thanks. I have a funny, well, maybe it's not funny story about my mom. So every morning in the winter time, she boils her kettle of water, and you would think that she's going to make coffee, but no, she takes her boiled kettle of water out and fills the bird bath to melt the ice, and the birds are all waiting for her there. And then she comes back and makes another kettle for coffee.
So they know she's coming to rescue them and
yeah, and she thinks of her birds first.
That's good.
But she needs one of those. Well, she actually has one of those heaters now. So that was a memory from my childhood.
Yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way. You can figure it out.
Yeah. Well, when the birds are just like watching you through your kitchen window, expecting you to bring out the hot water, you just feel obligated to go and, refill their water.
Yeah. Well, that bird bath, we cover it at night to kind of conserve the heat, so it's not just running all night. So we cover it with a piece of insulation board, and I will go and put the little tray of food back out there and do a few things. And if I'm late, they're like, "Where the heck are you?" We're ready to eat now. So they do pay attention. They do pay attention.
Do we have any people with comments about animal attracting birds and stuff in winter? You can put them in the chat.
So since I'm host, it won't let me put a question in there, but I did have a question for like the water bubbler or a small water fountain. Do they like that to be kind of out in the open or like under a tree or, some kind of cover? They like it anywhere.
Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I recommend putting it very near cover. Mm-hmm. So like we have quite a few hydrangeas behind the bubbler. Mm-hmm. So birds can get to get into those twiggy plants really quickly if a hawk does come in. I think shade is important in the heat of the summer. Mm-hmm. So ours are all basically near plants in shade, when we have everything, because we have a few other little bird baths that we have drippers on. And but nothing is out in the open per se. It's really kind of in sheltered spots in the garden or on the deck.
Great, thank you.
Okay, sure. Oh, I had my website up there. I do a blog too, so if you have any other questions or just want to investigate our blog and our website, it gets a lot of traffic. There's a lot to be looked at there that might be helpful too.
I have a question for you, Margie. You mentioned that you only keep your bird feeders out in the winter. When in spring do you take them in generally?
Well, my main focus is to provide the natural food with the plants so that they can find the caterpillars and the other food they need. I would say by the 1st of March, we've brought the feeders pretty much. Sometimes I'll leave a couple up because some of the migrating birds and migrating finches, like rose-breasted grosbeaks, they will come to the feeders too. So into April. Okay. Hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And there are a few other questions in the chat here. We have, you mentioned leaving leaves for the bugs and such. How thick do you usually leave those?
We leave a couple inches to 3 inches of leaves in all the beds. And because we're downhill from the neighbors, we get a lot of leaves blown into the yard. Mm-hmm. So Dan usually rakes them and hauls them down into the wooded wetland area. And it works down there. We have that place that and we get rusty blackbirds down in there, robins turning over the leaves, finding food that way too. So we try to make do now with keeping all the leaves on our property that we possibly can. We didn't have any picked up the last couple of years.
And do you remove any in the spring and mulch them and put them back, or just let them decompose where they are?
We let them decompose where they are. We have not put mulch in our beds in the last 8 years. Oh, no. Not since 2015. So it's working. It's working beautifully. And we're seeing more bird species each year.
So some plants, like native annuals, especially if the leaf litter is too thick, they won't germinate because they have to have that sunlight hitting the soil to germinate. And you'll notice that in nature that a lot of those native annuals kind of grow in either like windswept or floodplain areas where the water or the wind washes the leaves away naturally. But in the forest, there's usually lots of leaves, so the forest species are used to that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's honestly not a lot of Q&As in the chat right now, but I've got another one for you.
Okay.
You had mentioned the goldenrod and which birds would come and eat off of there, and I was wondering if either of you know of any good resources for learning which native plants attract which birds.
There is one book by a Wild Ones member. It was written years ago, and I'd have to run upstairs and get it to be sure of the title. I'm sorry, I don't have it right on me, on the tip of my tongue. But she does talk about different plants, and then we'll give a whole list of the birds that use the hollies, or birds that use the elms, or whatever. The only drawback that I found to the book is that it has all this stuff, but then you go to cross-reference and find it again, and it's hard to find it. But it was helpful. It was a helpful book to have as a reference.
I think you can also look at like the beak shape of the bird and the seed shape in the plant, and like if it's a purple coneflower, they need like tweezer beak, or if it's a bigger seed, they have to have a crushing beak.
That's true.
But I don't know of a reference, so I just plant things and hopefully birds come.
Yeah. The goldfinches eat a lot of different seeds. I could have shown 1,000 pictures of goldfinches on different plants. The pine siskins aren't here every year, and their beaks are finer, more needle, almost needle shaped. But they eat many of the same foods. And so it just varies. I think the important thing is to get as much diversity as you can in your space. Get coneflowers, get liatris, get Vernonia, get all these different plants that have different shaped seeds and different size seeds, and see what comes in.
Yep. So right now my beautyberry has lots of berries on it, and I've seen the robin on it. What other birds do you see on beautyberry?
On beautyberries, I've had bluebirds, brown thrasher, catbird, hermit thrush. Each year I see a little bit more, and each year varies as to when they're ripest. Like all the ones down in the garden, the main bird and butterfly garden, are gone now. I mean, they got wiped out sooner. I have some that are newer plants up in the beds in the front of the house, and there's still berries up there. So I think it's partly there's a little more cover in the garden, so they feel like they can be safer down there, maybe. So I keep looking. There's still some out there, and it's not a favorite berry compared to viburnums and some of the other fruit. So they will eventually. It's like when push comes to shove, they eventually will eat it. It just isn't maybe their favorite compared to other fruit.
Yeah, I've heard that beautyberry is a low sugar so that it lasts longer into the winter, but it's not the candy that the birds are looking for early on.
It's certainly
mine is also near the street, which is why it maybe still has a lot of berries on it.
Mm-hmm.
What about coral honeysuckle? Mine is just loaded with berries, but it doesn't look like anything's eating them.
I know they disappear. I'm not always sure what eats them, whether it's the cardinals who tend to have a nest and they kind of winter in that arbor. It's like spice bush berries. I had more of those this year, and the robins just really went after those. I just had more fruit than I had in the past to pay attention to it. So it's each year I think can be a little different depending on when the fruit is ready and when the larger flocks of robins or other birds come through. But it's what keeps you looking. It's what keeps you interested, because there's always something different out there.
I'm going to show you a picture of my owl that
Oh, good.
see this owl here? He's right outside my kitchen window. He's like 5 feet from the kitchen window there, staring at me, wondering if I'll fill the bird feeder so that he can eat my birds. I think.
I don't think I've really ever seen a barred owl take a bird.
Yeah.
The red-shouldered is real.
He was pretty intently looking at, well, the bubbler is right there too, so maybe he was looking at the bubbler. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah.
What he thought was so interesting right there. But because that house behind him is my neighbor's house, so I went over to my neighbor and asked them to come out and look at the owl. So we all stood out there and watched the owl in the yard for 10 minutes or so.
That's great. That's great. They're my favorite.
Yes. I just want to pet them, but they probably wouldn't appreciate it. All right. So overwintering butterflies, we talked about that a little bit with the leaves on the ground. Like you want to leave your leaves so that all the butterflies and other insects can pupate over winter, and don't throw them in the yard waste, or don't grind them up with the mower. They're no good to us that way. And these three pictures I chose because it's like it's winter color and texture. It's still pretty in winter. So on the left I have the little blue stem. The middle is the beet grain, and the right is the ashy sunflower. And if you have a small yard, you probably don't want beet grain or ashy sunflower in it. I have a pretty large yard, but beet grain, I really like the way it arches, and it's a great ground cover. I have it down in the back of my yard near the ditch where the honeysuckle used to be, and it's helping to hold that bank in place. And then the ashy sunflower is colonizing. And if you ever want to see a lot of it, go to Henge's conservation area. They just have a, um, no, not Henge's, Young conservation area. They have like an acre of ashy sunflower there. Yeah. But I control it just by digging out around the edge of it. And I think it looks really cool in the winter with those black stalks sticking up. And these are all great places for the birds to hide, and the insects and the squirrels and the bunnies. So I was looking around the yard for seeds that are still out, and I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but this one on the left those are seed heads from the wild hydrangea there. And then next to the right there's some Leatrus seed head, and then also the little blue stem. And then up front here is the mallow, rose mallow. A lot of these seed heads do not germinate. They get weevils and stuff in them before you can get them to germinate. And then on the right, I have blue wild indigo, which also gets a lot of weevils. So sometimes the wild indigo has a lot of duds for seeds, and also sometimes it takes the seeds like 3 years to germinate. So it's a plant that needs a lot of patience. Being an indigo also, so to get legumes, it's a legume, a bean, and to get those to germinate, sometimes like one way to do it is to scratch the surface with sandpaper to break up the seed coat. And that kind of mimics like going through a digestive system, because like we're not going to eat them and plant them. So, or boiling in boiled water, also kind of digestive system, or scratching them and boiling them and then planting them. So they need a little bit of torture to break down their seed coat before they'll germinate. You could also like find a raccoon to feed them to and then collect their poop. Whatever suits you. So my seeds, like I collected most of my seeds earlier, but there are still seeds out there. If you are just thinking about that now, you could go collect some. And a lot of the seeds in Missouri use cold, moist stratification, which means they have to have like a wintertime experience to germinate. So they need some cold and they need some wet. And to mimic that, you could put them in a bag of peat moss and stick them in your fridge. Or you can just plant them outside, and the cold and wet will do that for you. I don't really do either of those at home. I'm kind of lazy, I think, and when it comes to seed germination, I generally just throw them out on the ground and hope for the best. My garden is pretty full already, and the plants I have in there are always making babies, so I feel like I'm pulling more plants out of my yard than putting plants in. So I haven't really felt the need to germinate seeds in a while. But Sue is here, I think, down here somewhere. There's Sue. And Sue Leahy, she does the seed germinating at home, and she has a couple of different methods that I've never used, and I thought she would share them with us. Are you there, Sue?
Yep,
There
I'm
she
here.
is. Here.
So, oops, sorry. Okay, so what I usually use at home is the spinach containers, the plastic spinach containers. I know some people use milk jugs. You can pretty much use anything that's got a lid on it, because you do have to cover it. The spinach containers, first of all, just say a word. It's very important once you see I've got several of these planted here, label them so you remember what's in them. And I just put regular potting mix in there and put the seeds on top. These work, the spinach containers work really well for really small seeds or things that are fluffy. So like the aster seed heads, the liatris seed heads, cardinal flower, which produces really tiny, tiny seeds. You can just tear the fluffy seed heads apart and just press them into the dirt. You don't even have to worry about removing the fluff. And then the cardinal flower, I just spread in there because it's really hard to separate them into individual seeds. I just pulled these out of the refrigerator where they've been since the end of October. I just pulled them out yesterday and put them downstairs. I have heat mats and lights downstairs, and they will germinate in roughly 2 weeks and start growing. And at that point, I will uncover them and just make sure the moisture level is holding. You can't transplant those tiny seedlings until they have 2 sets of leaves. If you try to do it earlier than that, they will just suck back and die. The bigger seeds I put in the seed trays you see in the middle and on the right. This works well for the bigger seeds, cone flowers, coral honeysuckle, passion flower. I'm trying to think what else I have in there. But anything that's got a bigger seed that you can individualize works well in the individual seed trays. The ones on the right are not covered because they are inside a cold frame. So essentially they have a cover over them. They're just not, it's not right over top of the tray. I've found that all of these work. So it's just a matter of making sure that before they go into the cold that you have them sufficiently moist. The ones in the individual trays are still outside. They won't come in until the end of January. We didn't get real cold until December. So October and November were too warm to do stratification. I will say one thing about the spinach containers, and I do a lot of cardinal flower seed every year, only because I have cardinal flowers right in my stream. And because it's a short-lived plant, and depending on how cold the winter is, whether or not they freeze, I'm always having to replace at least a couple every year. So I always try to grow some cardinal flower every year. Otherwise, it varies. It's whatever strikes me that I want to try growing. I have a limited amount of space, so I can't do everything. So I just kind of pick different things. This is a picture of my cold frame, which those trays are inside. And it works beautifully. The other trays are sitting underneath. It always helps to put them underneath something. I know some people go out and put them under trees or bushes, But as long as they seem to have some kind of protective cover over them, it seems to work. And this sitting them underneath the cold frame works well too. When I do bring them out and put them in my basement, I have them on a timer. We start out with, I think it's 6 hours of daylight, and we slowly increase it as we go on through the winter. I have all kinds of different light arrangements. I have some commercial one, which is on the left here. But you can also do it. There's just shop lights hanging. You can see in the top right, there's just shop lights hanging. Those work well too. And then I'm graduating from shop lights because they're kind of a pain in the butt. They're constantly having to replace the light tubes. So we're graduating to these light bars that we found at Home Depot. And they put out a lot of light, and I can put even a double tray of plants underneath there and it works. So as my shop lights die, we'll be replacing them with light bars. But I use heat mats to speed up the germination. Depending on what you're growing, it's not essential to have heat mats. It just makes it go quicker. I'm usually trying to have all my plants up and potted by the time we get to March, because I start to get busy at work and I don't have time to do it. Oops. So that's kind of, these are leftover. The passion flowers are left over from last fall. But over here on the right under the shop lights is where you can see the spinach containers. Getting ready to do their thing. I watch them every day, and I'm always excited when I first see that first green one pop out. Then when I get several popped out, it's time to take the lids off and go from there.
Sue, do you have this book here, the seedling ID guide
I
that
do
you can
not.
buy at Powder Valley? It's a really great book. It has pictures of what the plants. Oh, this is bad lighting. It has pictures of what they look like when they have just their first four leaves.
That's a
Because a
really,
lot of times those first two leaves and the second two leaves look so different.
yeah. I know what I've planted, so, but if you're planting outside, that's a really good way to identify those little seedlings. You have to figure it out because a lot of people accidentally pull them up as weeds. So
I have trouble in my seed trays with the wrong things coming up, just because I guess I get the seeds in my fingernails and get them in the wrong tray or
oh,
something. And
I
I'll have
haven't.
like sedges and liatris coming up together, and I have to figure out which one's which.
Oh, well, so far I haven't had that problem. So
You're just cleaner than I am.
Where your cold frame, do you water it at all, or does that keep enough moisture that you don't need to?
no, I water it really good before the first cold snap, and then I just leave it, and they will eventually pop up. Once they do, I will open the cold frame and monitor the moisture level a little better once they start to emerge. But if you give them a good watering, a good soaking before you put them down for the cold, they'll last through the cold period.
And I know you said that some of those were left over and under your lights from
The
this year.
passion flowers,
Yeah. So if you had
those are not
to,
new ones. Those are some that came up last fall, and I'm carrying them over through the winter. And the coral honeysuckle is left from last fall too. And then you can't see what's in these trays. There's some silky aster up in there that I just never got around to putting in bigger pots. So it's going to continue to grow in that little pot. And come spring, I should probably move it up into a quart-sized pot.
in pots that size, would they be able to overwinter outside, or should they need to be inside?
Um, I have never had good luck overwintering things in these little tiny pots, even in a greenhouse. So I would not recommend wintering those little tiny pots, overwintering them outside.
I'll have to see how mine go. I have them outside. I covered them in leaves, all the sides.
Well, that might be some insulation for them.
Yeah.
I've tried carrying them over on the bottom shelf of my greenhouse. That didn't work.
Mm.
I've tried at work trying to carry them over in our covered hoop house, and that doesn't work either. Those little tiny pots just seem to freeze too fast and it kills the roots. So
I like burying mine in yard waste also during the winter, but you have to be careful that it's not composting or else it'll just bake your plants.
right.
So even like leaf mulch, like if it's green leaf mulch, it still gets hot and you don't want your plants to be baked.
Yeah. I'll have to go stick a thermometer out there.
But I've kept trees alive, like big tree pots that I don't want to bring in. I just pile mulch up around them.
Bigger pots, I don't seem to have a problem overwintering. It's just those little tiny ones. And I only brought the passion flower in already because I'm trying to grow it, and I will eventually put it into #1 size pots. So I discovered that for some reason, and I don't know why, because it's pretty easy to grow, but my growers, nobody grows passion flower vine, and I always have people who want it. So I undertook last year growing it to take to work.
I remember that passion flower being kind of annoying once it starts growing in all those little pots next to each other because they just all tangle together. And every day you have to go and correct them
Yeah,
so that you don't end up with one tangled mess.
they haven't gotten big enough yet for me to worry about that, but yes, that is a concern once they start growing fast. Any other questions?
I have one. Have you ever tried propagating coral honeysuckle, particularly the yellow variety?
Actually, somewhere in this mess here, I do have 2 yellow honeysuckle. I was so excited because my yellow honeysuckle had really good berries on it this year, and it doesn't always make good berries. So I was really excited. I thought, oh, good, I've got a good crop here. When I went back out a couple of days later to harvest them, most of them were gone. I managed to get 2 nice, good berries, and each berry had 2 seeds in it. So, yeah, one of these containers has those yellow honeysuckle seeds in them, and I'll see if they germinate. I'm really crossing my fingers and hoping. I would like to plant another one next to my current one. I think if there's another one there for cross pollination, it will do much better.
Sue, I have a question. This is Margie.
Yeah.
I have the coral trumpet honeysuckle on my big arbor down by the pond, and I wanted to grow some to put up near the street at the top arbor. And all I did was layer it, where you take one of the vines down into the soil, push bobby pins in to hold the vine into the soil, and at several of the nodes, it would root. And I ended up with 8 starts. I planted them thinking, well, if I'm lucky, 1 or 2 of them will take. Every single one took.
Yeah. That is a good way to start them.
I mean, if it's just something to mention, because if you do have a plant already, it's a reliable method, and it's really pretty easy to do. So just a thought.
What time of year would that be best done?
I did it like late May, I think, May into June, and then I
Want to do that while
transplant
it's
it.
actively growing,
Yeah,
so it has a chance to root, because then you're going to separate it from the main plant. And the only reason I don't do more of that, Margie, is because it is a clone of the parent plant.
yeah,
Whereas if you do it by seed, you're getting a little bit more plant diversity in there. So that's, but
true.
yes, it is an excellent way to do it. You can also do it from cuttings. It will take from cuttings, but again, it's a clone of the parent plant.
Okay, yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know who has really, really good luck with coral honeysuckle is Susan Burke.
Yeah.
And I've talked to her about it. Her seeds, she wraps them in moist paper towel and puts them in her refrigerator until she's ready to put them into potting mix. They start sprouting in her refrigerator in that moist paper toweling. And the only thing I can figure is because she's getting them from her farm.
Yeah.
And she says they have a lot of hummingbirds. And it's my personal opinion. I think those plants are getting super pollinated.
Hmm.
And that's why she does so well with those berries.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've heard her talk about them. It's wonderful.
So we'll see. I'm trying to grow a few. I'm not growing anywhere near what she does, but um, mine did not sprout in the refrigerator. So we'll see what happens.
What kind of refrigerator does she have?
It's just an old refrigerator down in her basement, a regular
Yeah,
refrigerator.
there you go.
I know I used to have one in my refrigerator in my basement years ago and got rid of it because we weren't using it. Now I wish I had it back, but you know, it's the way it goes.
Yep.
I keep I had these spinach containers stacked double level on one shelf of my refrigerator, and my husband was going, "What's this dirt doing in the refrigerator?" So, yeah. Anyway,
Well, Sue, can I have the screen back? Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I
sure.
hope in the spring you'll share pictures of your babies coming up.
I'll have to remember to take some. Yeah, that would be fun.
I just like when the seeds germinate, I just love to pet them. Like, it's very nice.
I know that's when I start talking to them.
Yeah, play them some nice jazz. So I went to the botanical garden recently, and I was happy to see that they had left their stems up. And this is some rattlesnake master here that they have behind the um, building there. Uh, and so don't forget how thinking about how snow looks in your garden. Like you should leave your plants up for the birds and the bees, but also for aesthetics. They look cool. Like to have little hats on your hydrangeas and be able to see the outlines of your shrubs and benches. We'll have snow someday. Not yet this year, but someday. Uh, Other things in this chapter, which we're not going to get to today, is winter watering. Don't forget to keep watering during the winter if we're having a drought. Um, Winter mulching, if you have bare ground or new beds, mulching in the winter is a good activity. It keeps you warm. And pruning when plants don't have green on them is a good time to prune. And I took this picture of a pruning cut where the pruning scar is going symmetrically all the way around the branch, which means that whoever cut it off nice and straight and didn't nick the tree at all, which a lot of times pruning cuts are done a little bit too close to the trunk and nick the trunk. Um, we're going to talk more about pruning next month. And our next book club meeting is going to be February 7th. at 7 p.m. and we're going to talk about pruning. We're going to talk about how awesome oak trees are. And if you have something that you think we should talk about, you can send me a message about it and we'll talk about that. So I wanted to thank you all for coming to book club, and I'll see you guys next month.
Thank you, Besa.
Thank you,
Besa.
Besa.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.